It's ridiculous. And we're back. Hi, everybody. We're back for Youth Ministry in the Lectionary, looking at Year A Proper 25, and that is for October 26, 2014. And we're looking at first at Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 12. So what stood out to you guys?
When I began studying for this week, I started by watching TED Talks because we're doing our Sunday series is now going to be all TED Talks, and then we're going to break into small groups to talk about them. And so I was looking for the TED Talk for this Sunday, and I came across one by Megan Ramsey called "Why Thinking You're Ugly is Bad for You," and it was a really good talk, and it talked a lot about how a lot of times our image is all that everybody sees, and she talked about one specific little girl who was a teenager, and she gets these different opinions, one from her mom saying you're beautiful, and then one from her peers saying you're ugly. And so she put on YouTube a video saying, comment, I want you to tell me, am I beautiful or am I ugly? And she got a lot of comments, and there were a lot that said you're so ugly, a lot of hurtful ones. There was one that said, go kill yourself. I mean, it was just so hurtful, and this girl is beautiful, and so it was kind of heartbreaking to watch it. But as I sat there and thought about it, my thought was, well, I need to change my thought from where I was supposed to be going in the lectionary, which was Deuteronomy, to the image of God, and talking about our image, and talking about how we are portrayed in this image of God, a beautiful image. And then I went and read Deuteronomy. And at the beginning of the semester, I come up with the different things that I do for the entire semester. And so this one, I had put the topic of God wants you. God sought Moses, even knowing his flaws, his imperfection. God sees the potential and shows grace. And throughout the text, it talks about Moses and how God allowed Moses to, first of all, see this promised land. He didn't allow him in it because, he messed up, and that was part of the following God that he did not do, and so he wasn't allowed to enter it. But then God buried him. And that in and of itself was something that it shows that God loved Moses. You know what I mean? Nobody knows where Moses is buried. But then it goes on to talk about Joshua, and how Joshua is young, and he has been watching Moses, and then he's lived into this call of becoming kind of the Moses to the people, and then it talks about how there's never been a prophet like Moses, and Moses was not the most wonderful human being ever. Before he went away, he had killed an Egyptian, and then God calls this man who has a stuttering problem, which is an issue with image and with how people portray you. And so all of that has really just been on my mind. And so I'm actually talking about not necessarily just our image, but how God wants you. God has this desire for you. And God wanted Moses. Anything that Moses threw at God, whether it was, I'm not good enough, or they aren't going to listen to me, I have a stuttering problem, I don't know how to talk to people, God always had a solution. God wanted Moses for this job, and he didn't just let him say, no, I don't want to do this. He sought him out. He continually sought him out. So that's kind of where my head is going right now.
Anyone else? I love that Chris one, by the way. So, how are you finding TED Talks for different things?
I went in and just I looked at the top videos right now, and the ones that I found, and some of them are going to be religious, and then some of them aren't. And I think we should talk about some things that aren't religious, because it's like they said at at the meeting on last Tuesday, they're here. It was actually a really good meeting. And I enjoyed it. Now, not everybody might have, but I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the speaker. And she talked a lot about how we aren't engaging in the conversations that are important to our culture now. And what, she talked about the lady in Oregon who is, planning to take medicine on November 1st to die gracefully and with dignity. And then she talked about, all other things that are issues within our culture that the church is not engaging in any conversation with. So I think it's important to talk about some of those things. So some of the videos that I found, I haven't watched them yet, so I couldn't tell you if they were actually like really good yet. A.J. Jacobson, who is an atheist, who wrote My Year of Living Biblically, and he's still an atheist. I have watched that video, and it's actually a really good video. But it talks about his year of living biblically, and so we'll talk about that. And in talking about that, we're going to talk about what being an atheist really is, because I think a lot of times we don't really know what it means. But when you're out with your friends and your friend is an atheist, if you don't know what that really means, how can you even begin to talk about your relationship with God and about the love of God, the love that you have for God, and why it's important to you? How can you even start there? The others that I found that I have not watched, The Power of Vulnerability by Brene Brown, How Great Leaders Inspire Action by Simon Sinek.
It's a good one.
Is it?
Yeah.
How the Worst Moments in Our Lives Make Us Who We Are by Andrew Solomon. I'm the Son of a Terrorist. Here's how I Chose Peace by Zach Ibrahim. If I Controlled the Internet by Revez. Letting Go of God, Julia Sweeney. The Doubt Essential to Faith, Leslie Hazelton. The Profound Journey of Compassion, and I can't say his name, Dayanda Saraswati. And then Why Does the Universe Exist by Jim Holt. So, and I don't know if any of those are good. Those are just kind of where I'm starting to watch them.
Yeah.
Hey, who was the speaker at that thing Tuesday?
Oh, if you hadn't asked me, I could tell you.
Okay, I didn't ask.
She at Emory, and she's taught for many of the little things. Hang on, let me see if I can find the email. But she was fabulous, and personally, and I love to hear. And what was interesting is she asked for all of the modern or postmodern and postmodern, which is the for all of postmodern.
Is that like modern again? Like, does it cancel out?
No, it's like the generation beyond us.
The
next generation, I think, is where that's going.
They don't exist.
Do what?
They don't exist.
Well, they do.
We call those youth.
Yeah. It's like, what are you talking about? Okay, let's see here. It's
infants.
Well,
Daniel, when you scratched your eye, your mustache just kind of floated there.
Anne Burkholder. But she was, I really enjoyed it. But when she asked us to raise our hands, there were a few. And it just spoke to how many of our clergy are older. And there's nothing wrong with older clergy, but we just don't have that many new young ones in there. And so it spoke to that. And it also spoke to, and a lot of times when she was talking, a lot of us were shaking our heads. We were all like, yeah, totally. We need to be in conversation like that. And a lot of the older people were also shaking their heads. So I think it was a really great conversation. I hope that fruit comes from it, being in covenant with one another. And I was actually talking to another youth minister who was there, Trey, and I'd said, sometimes it's hard because, we want to be in covenant with one another, yet we're so far away, and it's really hard. So I don't know. I think it can be a great thing. I just hope that fruition comes from it. But I enjoyed the speaker. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed being somewhere with a group of clergy. I wish that we could have a clergy meeting without a plan. Kind of like our Sabbath retreat. I wish that we could just be together and fellowship with one another. and get to know one another without having this overall idea of what we're doing, just by actually just spending time together. But that's beside the point.
Interesting. Wouldn't that be interesting if the bishop required you guys to go to something like that?
Well, he required us to be at this.
I know, but if he used the same power and said, like, you guys have to be at this thing, and when you get there, he's like, okay, there's no agenda.
Well, I think he's trying to require us to be at the clergy retreat in March. I don't know. It depends on rooms. I need to actually make a reservation anyway. But that's like, it's a bunch of meetings. I mean, we really don't, you know what I mean? It's just kind of, it's a great thing, but we miss out on that relationship. We don't have time to be in relationship with one another. That's one thing I loved about the Sabbath retreat. It was simply being in relationship with one another. There was no agenda. It was just being together.
True.
I think it would be great to answer your question. But I'm an extrovert, and not all people feel that way.
Well, but on the Sabbath retreat, you don't have to be together the whole time.
Correct.
There's no agenda. So.
Okay, sorry, way off topic.
Getting back to Deuteronomy.
I liked how it talks specifically about the laying of hands and in verse 9, and I was like, yeah, it's a good thing to bring into maybe confirmation or something, to like talking a little bit about heritage, talking a little bit about apostolic succession in there, and that's something where you don't usually get to see something that physically happens and connect it directly as often, in a way that fits into a story that the kids can latch onto. So it works.
I think that's cool. For our confirmation, we do a laying on of hands, and then their mentor actually has created a mantle, almost like a little stole, that they pass from them to the confirmand.
Oh, I love that.
A really cool moment. And then they light a candle that they are part of the light in this congregation and in the world. And then they sign their name in the membership directory, and then they get a new Bible that relates to them now.
So do you do that during your service?
We do. We have a whole confirmation worship Sunday that we do that. So,
it's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah, feel free to steal all of it. It's fine.
I really might.
It's okay. I'll give you more detail if you want it later.
There's a great song that you can use for confirmation from a guy named Andrew Peterson. It's called Faith of Our Fathers. And it talks about how it's kind of passed along, and it's pretty awesome. It's worth looking at if you do special music on that day.
Interesting. I like that. We're adding it down.
Yep. Yeah, I would say for us as youth workers, like one of the things I would read in that passage from Deuteronomy was, who's your Joshua? Like who are you passing on ministry to next? My covenant group just read 1 Thessalonians all together this week, and one of the things I left there thinking was, we don't do ministry that way anymore. You know, Paul had Timothy, who he was passing this on to, and he was giving him responsibility in the mantle, and man, we don't do that, at least in our structure. I think it's a challenging thing to think about, like who are the people that we are equipping and giving ministry to. Because, you know, Moses knew Joshua was the next guy and passed it on.
So you mean like having an intern for a summer doesn't do that?
I mean, I think those people can be that to some degree. But, like, you know, and I don't know. Both my last churches, I've, had to turn in my keys before I could think about what happened next. But, you know, could there be a plan in place so that when you leave, you know, there's space and time where you're working with the next person, or maybe it's even somebody that grew up in that environment and is taking over. I think you do see that in some larger churches, and I think that's a cool model that we've walked away from. And and here would be my biggest thing, it makes it less hired gun. It makes it more pastoral. You're passing on leadership versus we're just going to go hire somebody.
Well, and it allows the kids to also experience the change as well in a good way.
Yeah.
And that's important because it takes a long time, especially when a youth minister leaves suddenly, for another person to step in and gain the confidence of the kids.
Yeah.
At least 5 years. That's a random number.
It makes me want to cry.
You can do it, Jason. I've survived worse.
Yeah, that is truth. You can testify. So.
Well, I think we've pointed out some really good things in this Deuteronomy passage. Is there any other nuggets that you want to throw out there before we move on?
I think I love the idea that God buried Moses, and it doesn't say this in the text, but in part it is so that there is not the temple of Moses that people go and worship at.
Yeah.
Like, and he knew there was the danger of that, and so I think there's some beauty in that he sort of said, I am going to take care of him, and you guys go forward into what's next.
And I also thought about the next time Moses appears is the transfiguration.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, obviously Moses is this important character. And for the transfiguration, he represented the law. The people, he represented the law so from what Jason is saying, if there may have been a temple had they known where he was buried and such. So I think that makes sense.
I think that's a very good point. Because it's very easy for us to completely miss the point and worship the wrong thing.
Nuh-uh.
I know.
Well, I've never seen people make an idol out of a pastor. Never. It's a good thing we're not like people back then.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we're nothing like them.
We have definitely learned all of our lessons. Moving on.
Sorry, I feel like I'm making everything cynical.
It may be one of those days. It's okay. Let's look at Psalm 90. What stood out to you guys there?
Like just the epicness of who God is, and that Moses, it is a prayer of Moses, like this psalm, and he is just like, dude, you're it. You make it. You turn us back to dust. You craft the mountains. You're all of that. And I think there's just there's a beauty to that. Today is Rich Mullins' birthday, and he was the guy that wrote Awesome God, and like I was listening to some of his stuff today, and I don't know, I was convicted by, that's a cheesy song of like, whatever, but like we've lost some of that awesomeness and that awe that I think shows forth in what Moses writes here.
In the NRSV version, the first words are, Lord, you have been our dwelling place. And I love the words dwelling place, because a dwelling is a place that you live. And so you live in this power of God, it's just, it kind of creates the awe in God is when you live in that, when you live knowing that God is with you and within you and for you and before you and behind you. I don't know. I love the term dwelling place.
That is very cool for sure. I think this also ties into the Deuteronomy thing. There's kind of here's an end, here's a renewed, here's a turning away, and like kind of ties into that. Obviously not by mistake, but I think it's kind of like a life cycle type feel to all of this, which is kind of cool. But in the life cycle, God is the everlasting through it all.
It's like saying he's going to continue once I'm dead. I love that. And at that point, he has died, and Joshua's the it just, sorry, it's exciting.
Yeah, well, and especially if you think about verse 17 as being this closer where he's saying, may the favor of God rest on your hands, and the work of your hands. That's just powerful. To think that he wrote that in some way to send it so that they would remember. It's huge.
Love it. Sorry, I'm taking a lot of notes today. Some good stuff. Daniel, you got anything on the song?
Nothing other than like it'd be a really solid verse to have as a covenant for a group, for a community. Like we want to be this, and we want our lives to reflect this, because it's really, it sounds like something that I would want a lot from my youth. I think I might end up using it that way.
Very cool. All right, moving on. 1 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 8. What you got? Bueller.
I think it's an interesting, it's this passage where he's sort of saying, here's how we were when we were with you, and that, for us who do what we do, it's interesting to think about, are we these things, are we making our appeal not out of error or impure motives? We're not trying to trick people. I would say be emotionally manipulative. See that in ministry a lot. But we speak as people God's approved for the gospel. There's some power there. And I love especially verse 6. We were not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else, or even though as apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority. I just love that idea that they had all this power and yet they chose not to wield it that way. And what he says in the next verse, instead we were like little children among you. And that was enough to win their hearts. Because if you go back to last chapter, he's writing that letter in part because they had to leave Thessalonica, and if the church there was going to succeed, if they were going to keep going. And he writes in the first chapter of we hear all these great things, and it is astonishing to us how you grabbed a hold of the faith, which is especially then even more interesting when you think about, to the best of our knowledge, this is the first letter written in the New Testament. And so he's saying, man, you guys really believe this. And then in chapter 2, he's saying, and how awesome is it that it worked, not because we coerced you or we tricked you or that we used anything other than we tried to be faithful to who God called us to be and just be among you, which, comes up later in another verse. I don't know. There's some beauty in that.
Mm-hmm. I think verse 8 stood out to me as a youth minister, and I think it'd be a really cool, this is why we do what we do. So deeply do we care for you that we were determined to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also ourselves, because you have become very dear to us.
Yeah. And I love that idea that, because we cared about you so much, we didn't just share the gospel with you, we shared our lives, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for us, sometimes the danger is we share the gospel, and maybe not our lives. And I think he's saying those are both hugely important. One church I worked at before I got there, that was blown up in a big on their wall, that verse, which I thought was pretty cool. I didn't have to paint over it 5 years later.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen this one stitched into a pillow, so that's cool that it was at least painted on a wall. Oh, that's cool.
I'd buy that pillow.
Or at least that T-shirt, maybe. That'd be okay.
Yeah, there you go. That's actually, man, I need to think about that. We're getting ready to do a youth group shirt. That may go on it.
Like it. Write that down. You should just put 35 different random verses on there.
to be in our club, you have to know these verses.
No, like do it in such a way that it reads like one big passage.
Oh, that would be pretty cool.
And then you just rewrite the scripture to make it say whatever you want. And that's what we do, right? You know? Anyway.
She's like, I can't believe they just said that.
Yeah, not good. Moving on to the gospel passage for today, Matthew 22:34 through 46. This is the part with the great commandment and a little bit more. What do you guys think about this?
I guess my first instinct was, why is it all together? Like, so 34 to 40 makes sense to me. It's one piece, greatest commandment. But then, for whatever reason in the lectionary, they add the 41 down, and like, I don't know why. So if anybody had thoughts on that, I would love to hear them.
No, so working with our youth leadership team, because they're helping to start planning a lot of this and looking at the lectionary and stuff too. They have the same question. And to my knowledge, I don't know if I've ever heard a minister actually preach on the two together.
Right.
I feel like we separate one or the other. And normally it's just the greatest commandment because the other one doesn't fully make sense in our context.
Yeah.
A lot of what's going on. But it is interesting because I think it's kind of supporting, like, so this guy just summed up all of the law and the prophets. And do we take him at his word? Why should we do that? And then you kind of get the final rebuttal of he's not just some random prophet.
Mm.
And so it kind of like puts like that extra stamp. So like Jesus has summed up everything. Signed, Jesus the Messiah. Like
well, it is funny.
This
like,
is a big deal.
well, and you look at like the last few passages, the last few weeks, it is people asking him questions and trying to trap him and all that. And so verse 46 is, and no one could say a word in reply. And from that day on, no one asked him any more questions. It's like the mind.
Yeah, our youth said that
I'm done.
That's exactly. Our youth said that would be awesome if after we did that we just like mic drop something. And winner.
It seriously might be the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like, and you can't say anything anymore. Like, this is it. Done. Stop asking me.
Which, it is, in Matthew's account, it's right in the middle of Holy Week. So it does sort of go, we're done. Let's go ahead with what comes next.
Yeah. It is very interesting for sure. What are some interesting ways that you've talked about the greatest commandment? Or do you have any creative way? Because I feel like it's one of those passages we've heard 1,000 times. And like, yeah. Love God with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. Great. We've stitched it on pillows, painted on walls. We still don't do it. So how do we continue to push towards this?
I semi-used this verse for our retreat that we had done in September.
Mm-hmm.
And I use one word that will change your life. Mm-hmm. And in that book, it talks about finding one word to live by for the year. And there wasn't scripture within it, but it had a very Christian basis. And so then I used the text from Deuteronomy that said, write these words upon your forehead, upon your wrist, upon your heart, and your soul. Bind them on your wrist. Teach them to each other. That. And so one of those things, obviously that verse is talking about love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. But I took it a little further and said, how can we not only live into our, can we also live into loving each other? And so I had a creative thing that you could do. I bought little leather wrist bracelets from Amazon and had them write their word on it with a Sharpie. and so that they could take it with them, so they could wear it.
Mm.
But I mean, that's just an idea. It's something different. It's a really, honestly, when I read Matthew 22 and read the text for the week, I was like, not going to use that, because everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And we hear it, but like you said, we have a hard time living into it. In what new ways? How can we help them to encounter what that really means? And how can we help ourselves to truly live into this call of loving God with everything that we have, and then loving our neighbor just as much?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of shied away from it, and decided on Deuteronomy. But the reality is you should be doing this no matter what text you use.
Well, in theory, you are, yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. So I pushed our youth leadership team because they were like, yeah, this is really easy. It's even our church slogan, and it's really simple to say, but it's really hard to live out. And I was like, why is it hard? Some of the reasons they said is people are mean. That's fair.
True story.
We have distractions. We have different opinions. I talked to them about the idea of EGRs, which are extra grace required people.
Ooh, I love it.
Yeah, we all have those.
You're like, yeah.
So you could, your secret inside language could be like, she's an EGR.
Yes, because that's totally loving your neighbor as yourself.
Exactly. I think this is exactly what we're talking about here. But it's interesting to me, and what I'm going to point out to them is the reason it's hard is because we're still kind of stuck on ourselves. If we actually start looking beyond ourselves to the kingdom of God, then our differing issues don't matter as much. Because there's things like the Imago Dei that create us all in God's image. It's different, but it's all the same idea. So things like that are interesting for sure. And so their creative idea is to kind of get the part across of like it's really simple, but it's hard to live out. It was to have like a dot on the screen and say, okay, whatever happens, just watch that dot. Don't move. Don't look at anything else. And we would start putting different videos around the dot, playing loud noises. Someone's going to like fall over at some point, all that stuff. And so it's going to be an interesting way to kind of start that conversation, which I thought was pretty creative. So,
that actually is a pretty decent idea.
Yeah.
This week, the Feasting on the Word, like their curriculum, they start at the beginning and have kids sort of make up what they think the rules should be, which is kind of an interesting approach, and then jump into the text. Because I do think if you start with the text,
they check out.
Yeah, I mean, like for all the reasons we said, it's the everybody knows kind of thing.
I would say one out of left field idea would be to talk about how with your mind and strength is a call to all-encompassing identity, and since it's near Halloween, to talk about the different masks we wear. Ooh. And yeah, there you go. Get some really interesting costume ideas out there. And so that's a good way you can tie it into the theme. I'm also I really want to teach on ghosts, because we had actually a staff meeting where the devotional was about ghosts, and I want to tie in a little bit of Deuteronomy with Moses being buried. I like what you said, Jason, because like that would be actually a pretty neat thing to talk about in the midst of all that. But then how, as living, breathing creatures, we're called for a purpose that like requires that kind of action and that whole personhood kind of thing. Like you have blood flowing through your veins, and what does that mean as like a work of art? What do you like that means whole heart, mind, and body in that way. So I think I might talk a little bit about that.
That's good.
That's awesome.
The other thing you could use for a creative element with this, especially Jason, with your idea of like what should like our community rules be, like off the bat. The new show Utopia. Has anybody been watching that?
No.
So
I know about it.
essentially 15 people are thrown into this like 5-acre place, and they're told like to start over. Like they can make up whatever rules they want, however, whatever they want to do. Just give it a shot. And so, of course, for reality TV, they pick people that have very different ideas of what that is going to be.
Oh, so this is real life? This isn't like, oh, it's not like a sitcom. It's like
It is
It is
not
a
a sitcom.
No, it's a reality show.
It
Oh,
turns
okay.
out as a sitcom.
Oh, does it?
But it's a year-long experimentation to see what happens when you try to start over. So that could be a really good starting point for like if you had the opportunity to do this, what would be some of your like foundations? Because it actually took them about a month and a half to even sit down and talk about that as a group, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So,
I wonder if there are clips of that you could show.
I'm sure there are. And like it's also 24-hour streaming on like 50 different cameras in their community.
Oh my.
I haven't done that. That just is not a good idea, I don't think.
No.
So, but I love
Um,
people watching, and this is like ultimate TV show people watching.
yeah.
Pretty much. And talking about and the masks that we wear, a good book that you might look at is called The Cure. I don't
Okay.
remember who wrote it. I had to read it for school. But it talks about walking down a path, and you can choose either trusting God or pleasing God. And the person walks down this pleasing God path, and he walks up to this mansion, and he walks in, and somebody says, "How are you?" And he starts to be really honest and say how he's doing, and then somebody comes up and says, "No, no, 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 we don't really. I mean, we don't really want to know." And they give him a mask, and he puts on this mask, and eventually he lives in that for several weeks, and eventually he just can't wear the mask anymore, and so he leaves and he goes down that path to trusting God, and he walks in, and the guy says, "How are you doing?" And at first he started to say, "Oh, I'm okay," like he had been, and then all of a sudden he just falls apart and just tells him exactly how he's doing, and some guy from the back was like, "Is that all you got?" And so it just, I don't know, that might be something worth looking at.
Yeah. I like that.
That's really cool, actually.
That book changed my life, like no joke.
Like you're not kidding.
Not kidding.
Not kidding.
No
But you
joke.
don't know who wrote it?
It's 4 people. Like, it's not just one person.
Oh, okay.
So, hang on. I'll look it up real quick and I'll tell you. I'm in my web browser. Sorry.
Anybody tackling Reformation stuff this week?
Nope.
I've had my fill of the Reformation already.
Does that work for you?
I like it.
Here's a link to the book.
Nice.
And it's called What You Think. What if God isn't who you think he is, and neither are you?
Ooh.
Yeah. Totally changed my life.
Cool. I'll check it out.
Definitely. All right. Anything else? We feel good?
I think that's it.
It's solid.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week. Bye-bye.